Welcome to, that was the practice session, you can tell. Right, welcome to the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. Wonderful to see you all here this afternoon for the Deane Stone lecture, and really great to welcome you here. My name is Adrian Paps, I'm Deputy Director for Public Policy. And let me say a few words about the lecture and then about today's topic and, most importantly, our lecture for 2025. The Deane Stone lecture was established to commemorate the work of two very important economists who had a long-standing association with NISA, Sir Richard Stone and Professor Phyllis Deane. They were two titans in the 20th century, working on things like national income accounting, systems of measurement, which we are still using to this day. A lot of this work was published here by NISA, but also by the Department of Applied Economics in Cambridge. Phyllis Deane, here she is, and of course we've named our library after her, left NISA to join what was then the Colonial Office, where she remained until 1949. She was also a president of the Royal Economic Society in the 80s and professor of economic history at Cambridge. Sir Richard Stone, as many of you know, was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1984. So it is one of our most important public lectures, and we have a wonderful topic for this year on examining industrial and technological transitions in the UK and the implications for productivity and competitiveness. Our lecture will say a lot more, so I will just say that this is a really, really important topic in terms of the twin transition, both the digital or technological, but also the green or sustainable transition, and how we think about that together, and notably to understand the implications for the overall economic landscape, but again, for productivity in particular, one of the things that we are very much focused on here at NISA. I can't think of a better lecturer to talk to us about this topic than our lecturer for 2025, Professor Raquel Ortega-Argiles. She's currently the chair of Regional Economic Development at the Alliance Manchester Business School, one of our close partners as part of TPI, the Productivity Institute. She's also there, a member of the Manchester Institute for Innovation Research, and quite crucially, and something which I'm sure she'll touch upon, the director of the Productivity Institute's Productivity Lab, that is the Productivity Laboratory, all to do with measurement, all to do with how we actually understand what lies behind productivity, but also how we can translate that into numbers. She's also the director of the Data Visualization Observatory. So you can see this is all about making sure the data is robust, but also making sure that we have access to it and we can get the message out even beyond the academic community. She's an associate editor of Regional Studies, one of the most important journals in regional economic analysis, and sits on the editorial board of various academic journals. She has, of course, published lots and lots of important articles in a number of leading journals, and dare I say, that includes the National Institute Economic Review. If you haven't already read Raquel's pieces in the National Institute Economic Review, please do so. They say it's available in all good book shops. I think that's correct. It's certainly available online. We'd be happy to help you find it. Raquel, in addition to all her academic research and a stellar career that's taken her from the University of Barcelona, where she did her PhD in economics, via a number of appointments, including at the University of Groningen, to the University of Birmingham, and now, of course, Manchester. She has also done a lot of policy advisory roles, and they include the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Committee of the Regions, the OECD, the European Investment Bank, and the EU Science Hub, as well as government departments across Europe. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Raquel for the lecture. Raquel, the floor is yours. And just to say, we'll have a lecture of somewhere in the region of 40-45 minutes, and then we have plenty of time for questions. So please do ask a question later on. Raquel.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to give this year's Deane Stone lecture at the National Institute of Social and Economic Research. Today, I'm going to present some of the work we are conducting with my colleagues at the Productivity Institute, Productivity Data Lab, the Thai directors, ADNSA, but also some pieces from the Innovation and Research Caucus, and also some work that we are doing at the Manchester Institute of Innovation Research. All of this work is around industrial and technological transitions in the UK and their implication for UK productivity and competitiveness. So in the last case, previous to Brexit already, we saw an accelerated kind of interest around the growing importance of the UK and also maybe today's world on the understanding of the importance of specialization processes and patterns around industrial and technological developments across sectors and across spaces as well. In particular, focus on localized specialization, trying to support local competitive advantage for global competitiveness. Also, an agenda on fostering economic growth by industrial resilience, partly through industrial and technological diversification. Also, a greater importance of the deployment of infrastructures and investments, try to leverage local opportunities, but also addressing local vulnerabilities. And all of these, I have to say, that are very much processes that are place sensitive and also path dependent. And they are heavily linked with the policy framework that somehow put them in place, and also it creates a series of institutions that allows the supporting of these trends. So what to say, the policy context in the UK at this moment is very much supportive of these trends in industrial transition and technology. In particular, we count nowadays with a varied set of strategies that support and condition these industrial and technological local ecosystems, if you want, from the plan for change that is purely mission-led growth, kind of directed, to the new UK Science and Technology Framework is published in April. Also, the UK Modern Industrial Strategy that somehow try to remove growth barriers into sectors and regions. But also the UK Trade Strategy that it was just published last month. I will also put a bit of emphasis on the just published, I think last week, the Strategic Defense Review that, as you will see in the coming slide or into the slides, they really put a lot of emphasis on improving the technological development on defense technologies and sub-industries, and also how they somehow can be connected with other kind of advantages that advanced manufacturing has in the UK. But also maybe already we had in 2023 the Mission Zero, the independent review of Net Zero, that somehow links with the new current clean energy superpower kind of agenda. So this is a kind of the policy context, and just to say that the policy context, as I was mentioning, is quite supportive of these in transitions. Why? Because they somehow reflect on the importance of increasing the competitive advantage that already the UK has in certain, technologies, on certain sub-industries that are critical for the growth of places, but also for the growth of the industrial ecosystem within the UK. So, for instance, I can even compare them and think about that the science and technology framework focus mainly on 5 technologies, critical technologies: artificial intelligence, engineering, biology, quantum, semiconductors. In the case of an industrial strategy, there are 8 kind of macro, maybe not only sectors, but macro sectors selected that are coming from advanced manufacturing to services, and they somehow are somehow explaining a bit how the industrial ecosystem, the technological ecosystem, and also maybe the industrial ecosystem in terms of services, it's somehow being illustrated in the UK. In the case of the UK trade strategy, they mainly support tech-driven exports. And as I was mentioning before, the strategic defense review somehow accelerate these innovation cycles in autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, and digital kind of warfare that somehow reshape those industrial capabilities that the UK have in this area. So all of these strategies also emphasize quite a lot the role of investment and the role of infrastructure that will support those the nascent, but also the present, the embedded kind of industries in the country, and also emphasize the role of regional growth, you know. So a bit taking into consideration that those sectors somehow sit in places, and those places, they have to be conducive for the nurturing and also creating and fostering this industrial growth. So this is kind of the policy framework where we are talking about this technology and industrial kind of landscapes in the UK. The Centre for Cities, using the data city data, has illustrated where these 8 growth promoting sectors that are somehow the ones selected in the current industrial strategy, they sit. Well, if you can see, they are financial services, digital and technologies, creative industries, clean energy industries, advanced manufacturing, professional business services, life science, and defense. So the majority of these sectors, 7 of them, they are heavily concentrated in the in the south of England, in particular in the greater southeast, London and the southeast. The majority of them, they are mainly present in urban areas, and probably the only one that does not is heavily concentrated geographically is defense. So this sector actually, it has been included in the industrial strategy partly because of other reasons rather than industrial transition. It's just because of, you know, the moment we are in. I also took a quote from the piece by Jones and Paul Sweeney. They say the co-location of firms show that interventions to support the specific sectors should be at least as much about place as they are about any specific sector, because actually it is not clear if actually, you know, sectors in particular, when we see the sectors where they are located and the correlation of this collocation in terms of place, we can see that actually the sectors that are heavily service oriented seem to be co-located in urban areas, as we might think of, you know. So for instance, creative industries and financial services, or financial services and business and professional services, they are heavily co-located in metropolitan areas, while manufacturing, for instance, life science and advanced manufacturing, they are co-located, but maybe not that much in urban areas, but in areas that are surrounding urban areas, while other sectors, such as the sectors of defense, or sectors that they seem to be a bit like life science, that seem to be present around the country, they seem to be less collocated. So this somehow brings some risk. It brings the risk of that we have seen before in countries such as, for instance, the Netherlands years ago, that they developed a top sectoral approach. And that top sectoral approach, it was an approach of an industrial strategy that it was very much thinking about sectors first and not taking into consideration where those workers, where those places that they were the ones that they maybe were better to somehow locate certain activities were somehow supported for that. So I think that we have to be careful in not trying to go too much to a sector approach. We have to be a bit more encompassing and thinking about that actually not as, for instance, the Dutch top sectoral approach in the past, who was very much focusing very narrow sectors. I think that the industrial strategy that we have now allows us for these macro sectors, you know, like advanced manufacturing, that are a bit encompassing of different activities. So thinking about, for instance, the strategic sites accelerators, the mayoral recyclable growth fund, they seem to be important because somehow they support the industrial strategy, taking into consideration the place context as well. I'm going to come back to this later. As I was saying, I was mentioning that I was going to show a little bit, this piece that we prepared for the Innovation and Research Caucus, that it was mapping the commercialization pathways for emerging technologies. And we have done for engineering biology, and we have done for agri-tech, and now we are going to do it for robotics. And this piece is very much trying to look at the situation where we look at where infrastructure sit and where the business landscape sit as well, you know, and see if there is somehow a coherence in where the infrastructures to support these businesses are deployed. We don't know very much about who is first, you know, who is first, but we can see that, again, when we are looking at the top technologies that they have been selected by the science and technology framework, like engineering biology, they seem to be located in particular areas. Many of them, they are very much urban areas, not like agri-tech, and somehow they can support even the statement that the UK is very much recognized as a hub for innovation, but not very much as a way that this focus or these hubs of innovation seem to be linked with other places, you know? So not very much with this kind of knowledge diffusion part. So somehow, in the case of engineering biology, it was very important to have infrastructures very close to the businesses because of the laboratories. And we can see that actually the infrastructures seem to be the main reason for certain industries to locate close by. Okay. So if you are interested in the combination of the quantitative analysis to develop these industrial clusters on technology advanced kind of activities, and also the qualitative explanation of the challenges that firms working on engineering biology face, I will just encourage you to go to the reports of the Innovation and Research Caucus, and then you will have a much better understanding of all this mapping of infrastructures for engineering biology support and also the business landscape. But it's not the main core of my analysis today. Apart from this policy context, we have also an economic context. And I think that for here, I feel a bit selfish because I'm bringing my lab to illustrate a bit where we are sitting in terms of the productivity distribution in the UK. So at the Productivity Lab, we create insights, data tools, and we disseminate also productivity data that is elsewhere. So, and we provide kind of some commentaries that are very technical on how productivity data and productivity performance in the country is being somehow developed. So just to say that we have a very skewed regional productivity distribution. For the ones that are following productivity data year by year, just to say that again this year ONS has increased the ITL3 areas, and we have now 182 ITL3 areas. And just to show here, this is a comparison between the growth of productivity since the recession and the productivity today. So these are the latest release on productivity that it was released on the 19th of June. And you can see that by coloring, so the areas that are growing the most are mainly located in the greater southeast, and the areas that they present higher productivity levels are also located in the greater southeast. When we compare them with the pre-pandemic period, we see that actually some areas are benefiting from, in comparison with 2019, this is 2019, but other areas, they remain the same. So areas that they were growing heavily before the pandemic period, they seem to continue grow similar patterns, and areas that they were experimenting decline, they seem to also be in similar kind of level of productivity. We also produce some dashboards that try to explain what are the main reasons for this kind of productivity disparities within the UK. Here you have the latest years of productivity and how the productivity is distributed in the UK. So you see that the areas in green in the map are higher than the regional average. The ones in the center of the country, they present levels lower than the greater southeast, and the areas the areas in Scotland, they seem to be in between those areas outside the greater southeast and the greater southeast. I'm here not going to spend very much time, but again, if you are interested in looking through, the different indicators of productivity across the country, the drivers of productivity, you will see that there is a greater disparity on how different indicators of productivity are performing. While we have always London and the southeast as the top performance in terms of productivity, you can see that there are areas, for instance, the percentage of SMEs that consider that finance is a major obstacle, or for instance, other indicators connected with business performance, they seem to be somehow as well lower than the average of the regional productivity. But in general, the London and the southeast really overperform any other areas, not only in productivity, but also in terms of productivity drivers. When we compare also the different evolution of these productivity drivers across the years, we also can see that there are different determinants that they have been somehow persistently across the country deterring productivity. So for instance, in the case of the population that has lower skills, or for instance, in the case of vacancies showing skill mismatches and skill shortages in the majority of the regions across the country. So these are areas that are somehow persistent. So with this, I just wanted to show that where the industries and these technological activities sit across the country, they also sit in an environment that it might be more, promoting for this industrial transition. So an environment that actually is deterring because the local strategies maybe put in place are not somehow supporting these trends on industry or technology. So in terms of analyzing technological transitions, and this is what I'm going to be focusing in the main part of this lecture, we have to consider that actually there are two main transitions at the moment. The digital transition that is somehow driven by the implementation or the adoption of these novel technologies, and then a green transition that is aimed at reducing the environmental impact of these economic activities. As I said at the beginning of my lecture, these processes, they seem to be characterized by path dependence, by technological complexity, by the evolution of the industry in a particular place. So we have complex situations where we have regional diversification patterns. We also have the presence of agglomeration economies, the presence of industrial branching, real comparative advantage, or the presence of embeddedness, that is, which are the activities that are somehow located in a particular place. So these transitions, as I say, are becoming more and more important to also explain the increasing spatial inequalities and maybe productivity inequalities in a place, because they are directly linked with economic growth and productivity and labor market performance. So in this piece that I'm going to present today, we are trying to somehow explain how UK regions are prepared or not prepared for these challenges, how the twin transition is somehow unfolding in different regions, and how this somehow explain a bit the economic landscape. So because of the evolving nature of these transitions, somehow explaining digital and green sectors is very, very challenging to measure, right? In particular, when we are using very rigid kind of sectoral classifications. So when we are using, for instance, traditional SIC codes or NAICS codes, in this case, industries connected with digital, green, or twin have been very, very problematic to somehow assign to them. So for this, it is a consensus that we need what we call unstructured data. So these are sources that are somehow filled of very much text information that are giving a bit of a more nuance of the activities that actually are being performed in a particular place or in a particular industry, in a particular firm. So for instance, think about patent information, or think about company websites, or think about job adverts context. And this database, the commonality that they have is that they have advanced tagging systems, so they have these tags that somehow we can use to somehow describe what a firm is doing. So in order to somehow think about how this analysis somehow outperform, other traditional methods that they try to somehow explain the landscape of green industries or digital industries, think about information or data that is really real time. So this is really information of what is happening today, and not very much information of administrative data or census data, that there is a time lag between the moment that is being used and the moment that is being collected. So in this analysis, to analyze the digital green and twin transition, we are using the data city data. So for this analysis, we are using around more than 200,000 UK companies. For you to understand the relative, the whole relative is using 200,000 companies in comparison of using, for instance, a survey like the UK Innovation Survey. The UK Innovation Survey might have, an average of 3,000, 4,000 companies per year. Here we're using 200,000 companies, and we are using only a portion of this database. So here, this data with machine learning algorithms is somehow bottom-up classifying the companies into sectors that are somehow more relatable, you know, sectors that I will put some examples in a moment, but sectors that somehow are more connected with the reality of the day-to-day that we have, you know, the reality of the policy narratives around, the reality of the diversification of companies into different activities that are somehow related to the activities that they already are specialized in. So here we have 385 subsectors that can be created by grouping those companies into groups that somehow are related, these companies, because they share the same kind of activities. Among these 385 subsectors, we can classify 166 in digital, 45 in green, and 13 in food. When we implement relatedness techniques, we somehow allow a region that has somehow capabilities in certain kind of industrial activities to diversify into a new industry that somehow share those needs, those skills, those capabilities, or those technologies. And according to the principle of relatedness by Cesar Hidalgo, the probability that regions have to somehow enter in an economic activity is heavily dependent on the proximity that these activities have with the activities that are already happening in that region, you know, of those activities that are already embedded in that region. So here is just a very, I just selected 51 of these sub-industries. They call real-time industrial classifications because the information is today. This is the website today, the corpus of the websites, you know. And then by looking at the activities that these the content that the websites of firms that they see that these activities have, you can create an indicator that measures the proximity of these activities. So I give you an example for the ones that are sitting in the back, but think about firms in energy generation, firms in a space economy, firms in digital creative industries, in rehabilitation, legal services, media and publishing. So these are very, very narrow kind of industrial activities that they somehow describe the activities that firms do. So if a company somehow specializes in one of the industries, for instance, I will show you the proximity between net zero and clean tech, for instance. So as you can see, the yellow ones, the orange ones are the ones that are that they have a higher digital content. The green ones are the ones that are more connected with green activities. And in this case, the gray nodes are the ones that they are neither connected with digital or not green. Okay. So if a firm is somehow already specialized in net zero, it will have a very, very high probability, if they decide to move into clean tech, because the information, the tax system, the content of this sub-industries or the firms that they belong to these sub-industries is very, very similar, you know. So in order to compute the local relatedness, we have to take into consideration the specificity of the industry of that particular location and also the place. So the first that we do is we identify the local specialization. So for doing that, we look at the competitive advantage that that particular place has in that particular industry. And then we can somehow create a matrix that it looks at the industries and the roads all the places. In this case, we are doing it at the local authority level, so 374. I think that ONS has expanded them, so might be that there are more now. But we can create a matrix of local authority specialization, taking into consideration this comparative advantage that the local authority has in that particular industry. And then we can somehow look at the local relatedness, that it will be the average. So the ones that they have a kind of relation with that focal industry, and the ones that the local local authority is specialized. So, so here is an example of artificial intelligence and how in this particular local authority, all the different activities that are around artificial intelligence. So here we have a network representation of all the local authorities specialization industries here. So these are the ones that the local authority has a competitive advantage, so is somehow specialized, and they are linked with this artificial intelligence. And then by looking at which of these activities they somehow fall into the digital sectors, green sectors, or twin sectors, we can somehow construct the digital relatedness that local authority has in comparison or related to artificial intelligence. We can also construct an indicator of local relatedness on green, and an indicator of twin relatedness. So these will be activities that are that they have tags that somehow relate with green and digital. So for instance, green tech, or for instance, agri-tech automation. So this is an agricultural technology, but is specialized on automation that is a digital technology. Or for instance, energy management, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things, but in the case of energy. So with this, we can somehow compute all the pathways that these local authorities has to somehow move into a specialization on digital, green, or twin. So for you, to give you some illustration, we can look at these are the areas that they have a competitive advantage in artificial intelligence, but the ones that are really specialized on artificial intelligence are those ones that we see. So the competitive advantage, it can be small. We are looking at the areas that they have a higher competitive advantage in comparison with other specializations in that local authority. So we will say that they are specialized in artificial intelligence. And we can somehow look at the relatedness of artificial intelligence for those particular areas to digital, green, or twin endowments. And then we can compute, not only that was an example on artificial intelligence, but if we look at all the sectors that are connected with digital, we can compute an indicators that they somehow summarize the opportunities for specializing in digital industries, in green industries, or in twin industries. So let me organize myself. So in this map, you will see those areas that they have that are darker are the ones that they have a greater potential to become specialized in those particular sectors. As we can see, digital seems to be more concentrated in the south, like Buckinghamshire, south of Gloucester, Warwick, the area around London. In the case of green relatedness, we can see that is more spatially dispersed. So there are areas that they are rural, that they somehow they have the potential to be specialized in green areas. Areas such as the south of Lancashire or Perth, the areas that are more related to twin activities, like the areas of South Cambridge, Newport, Cheltenham, these are areas that actually they are performing activities that they can be somehow related to not only digital activities, but also sustainable activities. So think about clean tech before we were talking. So what is the relationship with local productivity of these relatedness areas? So local productivity seems to be heavily related with digital. So we can even see here, this is the later regional productivity data that was released 2 weeks ago. And we can see how there is a kind of a parallelism with areas that they present higher productivity and areas that they have more potential to specialize in digital sectors in comparison with other areas that are green, that is more dispersed. So in our analysis, we also look at what is the relationship or the probability that some areas they are specialized in particular sectors, depending on the characteristics of the area. So we look at how industry size correlates with population size, and we can see here that the ones that they have a parameter higher than 1, so somehow the slope is higher than the 45 degrees. They are the ones that are heavily associated with population, so there is higher returns of scale of population. So we can see that urban scaling laws, they seem to be more present in the case of digital than in the case of green or in the case of twin. So higher population, it will have a higher potential to specialize in digital sectors. So increasing returns to a scale of population. So around an increase of 10% of in local population will be associated with an increase of around 13% in the creation of business connected with digital content. Just a bit, just going a bit quick because I'm conscious about the time. We also look at the potential of looking at how related you are to twin, digital, or green, how much is going to be associated with being specialized in this digital, green, or twin sector. And we have seen how digital and green, they seem somehow to support each other. But the most important sector or groups of sectors is the twin. So somehow, if you are specialized in twin activities that they need somehow skills, technologies, knowledge that is somehow important for digital and sustainable or green, they seem to be having a more pivotal role to somehow allow a faster specialization, if either green or digital. So the opportunities that you have are higher. So when I was talking about the policies before and the comments by Paul Sweeney on the report about let's do not focus too much in specific sectors, here I'm talking about the potential that you have when you have somehow industrial landscape that somehow covers content in both digital and green. So, a little bit of conclusions at this time. So there are interrelations between digital and green sector. Digital industries seem to be to cluster more in urban and more productive areas, while green specialization or twin specialization seems to be more dispersed. So I think that we need to somehow understand the geography and the synergies between green and digital transitions Now, do I have 5 more minutes? Do I have? All right. So I would like to show you a little bit. So that was kind of the more optimistic part of my, kind of my lecture, where more or less many people say, well, digital is going on to the greater southeast, to the cities, to the more productive areas, and then us, if we want to be specialized, we want to have a comparative advantage, higher competitiveness, we will have to somehow focus into activities that are not as technologically upfront, maybe in areas connected with more green or more twin. Well, actually, what we have seen is that there are opportunities elsewhere. There are, if you are not looking at sectors, but you are looking at activities, opportunities for diversification, they are everywhere, isn't it? Here we have to also think about if we are somehow looking at the transition, at the digital transition, and also at the sustainable transition in tandem, we have to also understand how vulnerable are places to the energy transition or the net zero transition. So again, energy transition in many analyses, and that is quite a big agenda, for instance, at the World Bank or United Nations or the European Commission, it is really territory dependent, okay? So here, in this piece, what we are doing is we are trying to look at how we can construct a multidimensional indicator to measure the local vulnerability to the energy transition. And for that, I was kind of blessed that I had one PhD student that it was like a PhD in Spain and came to Manchester to work with me. And he has been working to try to look at the deployment of energy infrastructure across the whole Europe. So for the ones that are interested in this, we published a paper on energy economics that we somehow explain the deployment of energy infrastructure in Europe. And this is just some example of the data that he has accumulated during his PhD. That is the distribution of the deployment of infrastructure and the adoption of this infrastructure across the local authorities in the UK. So you can see the distribution of installed capacity for renewable energies is very much concentrated, in particular, of course, when we are talking about wind, because they have to be in areas that there is wind, no? So you can see that it's heavily, especially concentrated in Scotland, and of course the ones in offshore that it has to be somehow concentrated in coastal areas. But then we have deployments that are a bit more distributed across the country. So what we did here is we constructed a composite indicator that tries to measure the UK local vulnerability index to the energy transition, looking at the adaptability, the adaptive capacity that these places have. And because of the other analysis on the importance of the twin, not only looking at green or looking at digital without taking into consideration the combination of both, we decided to look at the adaptive capacity of places by looking also at digital transition, green transition, looking at infrastructure in green, but looking also at the deployment of digital infrastructure, how exposed these local authorities are in terms of the employment in non-renewable energy sectors, and also how sensitive they are in terms of economic indicators, energy indicators, and emissions. So the initial set of data count for around 134 variables, and we have interesting, kind of indicators that they fit all of these different kind of factors in the explaining the vulnerability index to the energy transition. So we are able to somehow illustrate how is the sensitivity to local authorities, not Northern Ireland, unfortunately. There is only England, Scotland, and Wales, and the capacity that these local authorities have to adapt, taking into consideration this kind of a multidimensional kind of problem, you know. And we somehow can see that there is a special distribution that somehow show that the areas with high vulnerability are somehow the ones located in Scotland, some areas in the south-west, so the west coast, some areas in England, you know, central England. The areas that they show less vulnerability are areas connected with Northern Ireland, the southeast of England, and the London. So for us, it was a strength that London showed low vulnerability to the energy transition, because in certain areas, cities, they might also present some more economic kind of inequalities, or some areas connected with maybe green transition is not as implemented as in other areas. So, so we see here how there are certain areas that they seem to be more kind of supportive of this energy transition, and also areas that are somehow connected with the vulnerability of this energy transition. So in terms of infrastructure, but in terms of other determinants. So I'm gonna finish now by presenting some conclusions. So the first is that in terms of policy and economic context, we have seen, so the framework for policy, they indicate that they would like to be a global leader in terms of science and technology, but also in terms of economic prosperity. Many of these documents also emphasize the role of well-being. And the majority of these frameworks, they somehow focus in removing growth barriers, in fostering investment, maybe in the creation of high quality jobs, also in somehow supporting communities across the UK. In terms of these frameworks, also we have seen that the importance as well of the regional growth and diversification. So place-based approaches are also important in all of these frameworks. In the case of the twin transition, we have seen the importance of the regional diversification, and also the fact that the geographic distribution of the digital, green, and twin somehow seem to favor different places. So offering somehow, if you want, pathways or opportunities for development or specialization to all the places in the UK, not only the greater southeast, as some of the indications of the digital transition seem to point out. But we have seen as well that in order to explain digital transitions or you know, the vulnerability or energy transition, because of the complexity and also the timeliness of the data, we need to go beyond statistical official data, and also think about data that is more, if you want, while quantitative, it still has a qualitative kind of aspect, you know, because if it's giving us an opportunity to do not somehow silo companies in one specific group. So think about the use of patents, the use of websites, the use of job adverts. Then the last part of my conclusions is that there is an importance on the role of relatedness. How related, you know, your activities are, the activities that you are specialized on to certain, you know, transitions, and this will indicate some opportunities for development. But also we have to take into consideration other trends like the energy transition that is territory dependent, is multidimensional, and as we see, it is quite important for certain areas. So it will also potentially it will create more, kind of regional disparities. So the takeaways for me is that we need to somehow think about tailored approaches, to somehow explain better the benefits and also, of these industrial and technological transitions, taking into consideration the uniqueness of this industrial and economic landscape in the UK, but also taking into consideration the importance of infrastructures, investments, and clusters, economic of agglomeration, and as some of the frameworks of policy also indicate, the potential of collaboration, international collaboration, but also collaboration within the country, and this is maybe for another lecture, but we have done a lot on research collaboration with another massive database with the Gateway to Research, that is the big, data on programs and projects by the UK government. And we have seen that actually there is more productivity in areas where there is more interregional collaboration and also interregional collaboration. So situations for strategic collaboration are also important. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Raquel, for a fascinating lecture. Shall we go and take our seats there and now have about 30 minutes or so for questions from our wonderful audience? I will take questions in rounds of 3. Couple of things before the microphone goes round. One is we are recording this. So for the sake of the recording, could you please tell us your name so that people who later on watch this and don't necessarily have the benefit of seeing you can know who asked the question. And secondly, what's going to be my second point? I can't actually remember now. I think my second point was, right, it was recording and names. There you go. That's 2 points. So who would like to ask the first question? Got a gentleman in the front, and we've got Heather. We'll start with you, please, and then we'll move on to Heather.
Peter Gordon, I'd be interested in agglomeration benefits. Have you done much work on that? And do you see advantages to specialisation? That's to say certain regions specialising in certain things. I see arguments both ways, but I'm interested in that.
Thank you very much, Peter. Just behind you, Heather.
Heather Roll. So I'm really interesting talk. Thanks very much. I'm interested in the role of universities in all of this, and in particular, kind of university clusters, and whether that explains, the conglomerations of sectors. And then I also thought, in terms of vulnerability, we know from research that's been done on attitudes to university, international students, and so on, that the public is very much supportive of investment of the kind of the economic benefits that universities bring to their local area. So I wonder whether that could reduce the vulnerability. So it's really about universities and their role in all of it.
Thank you. And then across the aisle. But
yeah, Bernard Casey. Seems universities come up. I was interested in the application of this across a variety of other industries, and indeed universities was one of the ones that I thought about. I was at the University of Adelaide a year or so ago, where there was a heavy concentration within the region on both educational, higher education, and secondly, health. Although the things which have been going on in Adelaide, the attempts to agglomerate things there, is a rather sad rather than a nice story. But I was picking on the sectors outside the kind of sector which you would refer to, but it comes back to what Heather was also mentioning, because to what extent would this apply to things like parts of the public sector? Could we imagine public sector agglomerations, and can we understand them the same way? And this has quite a lot of implications for activities which are supposed to be dispersing government activities to regions. It might also apply to things like the BBC, which is another case of things being dispersed to regions. Thank you.
Great. 3 great questions. Raquel, over to you.
Okay, so the benefits of the split, I think I haven't.
Yeah. Perfect. So,
So the benefits of a specialization, yes, I mean, but specialization is a very big word, maybe I would say, because when we are talking about the specialization, we don't want, for instance, duplication of things, right? We don't want that now, okay, so the industrial strategy has these 8 sectors. So every local industrial strategy is going to just pick these kind of sectors, you know, and create, you know, a creative industry hub everywhere, right? And this is why I think that we need to take into consideration more the combination of this specialization, rather than you will be specialized in life science, but you might be specialized in life science by the combination with Internet of Things. You might be specialized in life science, but maybe the distribution to, I don't know, NHS, you know, something like that. So what I think the most important lesson that we have somehow received from maybe the US or maybe the European Commission is to create resilience by kind of strengthening the value chains in places, right? So, and we saw this with our, for instance, the Brexit analysis that we did, that how Brexit somehow had extreme effects in advanced manufacturing in Germany, because actually it was so much interlinkages between advanced manufacturing here and advanced manufacturing there. So we were specializing in a particular very, very narrow part of the value chain that needs to somehow bring intermediate goods from Germany and bring back them to Germany, you know. So, so when we are talking about the specialization, I think we need to be very careful what type of specialization we're talking about. If we are talking about, you know, very fragmented and specific specialization that seems to be very much related to the places or the industrial landscape or the ecosystem of places, fantastic, you know. But when we're talking about the specialization in things that are too broad and everybody is doing the same, then it's kind of not very thoughtful, right? So, so as I say, I'm very supportive with the policy context of at the moment. If it is taken as broad sectors that everybody can chip in, but somehow they can customize them towards the reality of those particular places or those particular kind of firms that they seem to be the growth generators in some local authorities. I don't know if I have answered your question, but this is why I think that the benefits of a specialization, find out what is your clear niche that you.
There are these very great certainly have their market. But as you mentioned, I mean, all the manufacturing in one area and encouraging something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And think about the specialization in Detroit, for instance, you know, or, you know, so specialization was also pervasive in those areas, right? You skill or specialization in maritime harbors, like in Liverpool, you know, and then when, so I think that we need to think about specialization, thinking about a forward looking, you know, after specializing in this one, I'm going to move forward and just be specialized. So thank you very much. The role of universities. The role of universities, I think that it is extremely important, in particular in certain industries that they need very sophisticated kind of knowledge and also technical support. So what we have seen is like there are corridors. So in the analysis of engineering biology, for instance, that we are doing in the caucus, there we are looking only at the localization of businesses across the country in very narrow kind of technologies, so engineering biology, agri-tech, robotics. And then we have seen that how there are very, very specific linkages to places when there is a very, very small kind of or very important dimension of time, you know, when they need to use the lab and they cannot somehow spend that much time between developing something and take it to a lab for doing experiments and bring it back to the industry. So there is a very big constellation of startups, spin-offs, you know, and sometimes also big, you know, kind of multinational presence as well around universities when there is this big infrastructure deployment. In the case of other technologies like the agri-tech, when we were running the interviews, actually for them, it was no matter. They could just, you know, drive for 2 hours and then, you know, run some experiments or use machinery. So it is very much dependent to the technology. And then we see that, of course, in areas that are more rural, they produce this kind of agglomeration economies, you know, so universities, if they specialize in areas that they can generate, you know, they can benefit from also, you know, endowments, natural endowments or things like that. They can generate, you know, kind of an industrial cluster around the infrastructure of the university with the natural resources in those places. So very important, the role of university, and also very important in order to deploy, you know, so we have seen in all the work on subsidies, you know, how important universities have been to somehow also be the bridge between government and also, you know, SMEs, for instance, with knowledge vouchers or technological vouchers, where SMEs could use those little vouchers to go to the university and use facilities and things like that. So the role of universities is very important for even more than we think about. I think that nowadays at the university, in terms, for instance, of artificial intelligence, many universities are trying to set up artificial intelligence strategies. And many of them, they link with the creation of micro-credentials, you know, in order to somehow create a more secure kind of sector, you know, activities where the knowledge is somehow not regulated, but in a way that there will be some sectors that are created and there is no kind of regulation or accreditation system. So some universities are working to somehow create these little credentials for particular, you know, niches of industrial or technological activities that are nascent and there is no other regulation. So in the case of the public sector agglomeration, I think that we have not tackled here. And I think it's always very important. I think that the Productivity Institute, we are doing a lot on public sector productivity, also because ONS has beautiful data on public sector productivity. I think probably they are the pioneers of public sector productivity data. I went to the OECD subnational productivity indicators in December. They invited me, and when I was talking about public sector productivity, they were really looking at the UK ONS as one of the institutions that is doing the best in terms of public sector productivity. So, so to me, public sector, the most important role that has in this, in the promotion of, in particular, technological transitions, is the role of demand side. So public procurement, how public sector can act as the customer of technologies that are extremely risky and the private sector won't be able to develop either because are very costly or because so as a risk taker somehow and the ability to somehow bring those technologies to the market with firms. The main problem that we have seen on that, because at the Manchester Institute of Innovation Research, we are doing quite a lot of work on public procurement, is that in many sectors, the technologies that they are developing, the private sector technologies, are far beyond what the government is asking them to do. So I remember in a meeting with the auto industry, they were saying, they were asking us to develop some products with technology we already didn't use for like 8 years or 10 years. So I think that a better dialogue between government and private sector is needed, in particular with these kind of firms that are at the front end of the technology, because there is no point in using public procurement for technologies that are not, you know, the most innovative ones, right? Because it seems that we're going backwards. But I think that the public sector is very important for that.
Would you relate the defence review, which you made sort of reference to as a footnote almost at the bottom when you started as being part of that, but then this raises questions about the importance of the technology there and its productiveness outside a very narrow area. I mean, we saw recently there was a report upon Israel and the Israeli stock market performing better than any other stock market in the country, in the world rather, in the last sort of year or two. But if you actually looked at what this was related to, what kind of, it was technology, but it was not only technologies, it was very specific technologies. And if I sort of read that report, which I read in summary, I then think about the defence review as well, and whether there is actually sort of productive technology as opposed to destructive technology.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah. I think that the defense review, it really indicates that there will be focusing very much on very technological advanced ones. I think that the role of global collaboration is very important. So it is emphasized as well, you know, international collaboration in this kind of mega projects, you know, that sometimes I don't think that they can be very much conducted individually from one country. But I think that, of course, that is probably where the public sector should be the promoter of everything, you know, because the investment in those big projects and also the connection with, you know, the security of the citizens, you know. I think that is when the government should somehow play a very good role.
Great, thank you for those. I think there were 4 questions, but why not? Thank you very much. Let's take the next round. Who would like to ask a question? There's a gentleman over here, in the middle, and on the right. So let's start by the door.
Thanks. Hi, Icaro Rebolero. I'm interested in the policy implications of the work. So I'm thinking there's the 8 sectors the government has picked. And I was trying to work out whether your analysis suggests that we should not worry in terms of that every single region can benefit potentially, because, you know, the icon of colors pretty much everywhere. And that therefore it's all okay. Or if you are saying actually every region could benefit, but ultimately not everyone can benefit because you only have 8 sectors, there'll be agglomerations. And so whether you're suggesting you need a bit more intervention so that the place benefits are widely spread. And I guess the trade-off between kind of trying to have too many objectives, i.e. you want to have growth, but you also want to cover the place issue, whether you lose potential growth by trying to also take care of the regional policy with one
Hi, Matteo Bartra. Thank you, Raquel. That was really interesting. It was really interesting to see kind of the lead to economic complexity at a very local level. But I wanted to know if what you thought about potential cross-border relatedness with local relatedness. Do you think using the denomination of local authorities, so going at that level, is the appropriate one? Have you explored looking at wider economic areas? And yeah, just generally, what are your thoughts on the adequate size to look at the economic complexity of an area and how that could any implications for policy?
Hi, thanks very much. Really interesting lecture. My name's Harry. I've got the train down from Wales today. You might have recognised us from being at the bottom of every league table you have. hence my interest in this. I'm just wondering, from a devolved perspective, I know this was kind of more descriptive rather than making recommendations, but I'm just wondering, do you think there's anything that sort of devolved governments and metro mayors can do to kind of mitigate the threats you see here and kind of the opportunities as well? Thanks.
Great. Another 3 great questions.
Yes.
Raquel, you can either take the remaining 8 minutes if you wish, or we can try and get another couple of questions in by going a few minutes over, but it's entirely up to you. Let's see how we go. No rush,
Okay.
is what I'm trying to say. But
Okay, let me just see. So, so I presented the analysis that Center for Cities did on the location of industries or the location of firms in those 8 growth promoting sectors of the industrial strategy. And as you can see, I think is a bit problematic by the fact that the firms that they belong to those 8 firm growth promoting sectors, they seem to be heavily located in except defense, but I think purely because defense probably was kind of attached because of the importance of the international kind of situation. So to me, I think that the framework should be maybe not, if I were someone in a local authority, I will try to interpret the framework and not somehow, you know, copy and paste, right? So for that, I think that the sectors that they have chosen, some of them are quite wide, which is fantastic, you know, advanced manufacturing. So it will probably, the main takeaway from me today will be that you go home and say, well, you know, forget about CICO, forget about NACE code. They are too rigid. You know, the majority of the cases, they are used for tax purposes. It might be that there are firms, you know, that they jump from one SIC to another every year. So then think about more the nuance of activities that firms can do, right? And think about if we combine all of these different policy frameworks, what we have learned is that what they want for the companies to do is higher value added activities, you know? So they would like to think about, you know, the transitions and also the trends on digital sustainability, opportunities that they are to complement any activity that a firm is doing today, with bringing these complementers that they might position them in a more, you know, if you want, cool position. You know, I am now sustainable and digital because I am using artificial intelligence and I'm doing it in a sustainable way, right? So I think that this is the message I take from that, you know, embrace the opportunities. You know, you have all these technologies that they might improve your productivity, but of course doing it in a conscious way, you know. So if we interpret that way, yes, every single place, as I have shown at the local authority level, has opportunities to devolve, to develop, you know, and there will be mechanisms for those places that they have devolved powers to somehow support these new activities that might position the local authority in a more competitive way, right? So this is how I will interpret. So it's not a criticism, it's just a way to embrace what the frameworks we have now. In case of relatedness, okay. So relatedness is a place kind of. You can also develop firm relatedness. You can develop an indicator of relatedness for each company. So then you will have, if you want, the library of tags of that company, and then you will be able to be how related that company is to a particular other company, or how related this company is to a particular sector or a particular article, you know. So it's a very, very flexible. Actually, the real competitive advantage and relatedness is coming from the trade, you know, kind of literature. So it's to see how places, Ricardo Hausmann in Harvard and Cesar Hidalgo in Harvard, they develop these indicators to see how competitive are countries, you know. So they look at the atlas of complexity, of economic complexity, and they look at looking at maybe patterns, or looking at the different very, very narrow industries that countries do, how these countries, they can somehow move to a higher value-added activity, that they put them in a better position in value chains internationally. So your question about the potential correlation or spatial autocorrelation between, I think if it was the question about the relatedness of my neighbor and my relatedness, I think there are some analyses that they look at the spatial autocorrelation of relatedness.
I was what I think might say if the local authority has what I was pointing out was that if the local authority has a mix of companies, that will reflect in their local relatedness. But the effective labor market in the area might be bigger and cover many local authorities. So I wanted to know if you had tried different geographical levels, and what you thought was more effective or informative for policy.
Yeah, we use local authorities precisely because of that. We decided to use a more kind of legislative area rather than a statistical unit, like for instance ITL2s or ITL3s. In our work that we are doing at the Productivity Data Lab, originally, as we have done scorecards for ITL1 areas. Then the local area, because of the big inequality within the area of London, asked us to do an ITL3 area. But we end up having to do mayoral combined authority scorecards, because those statistical units, nobody could relate in terms of policies. So this is why we decided to use local authorities, because they are closer to the policy rather than just statistical units like ITL.
Do you think if that is used, so if you think of do you think there's a trade-off in what the policy might actually end up being if we present the data through the authority through that categorization?
Yes, so this is a very good question, because as I said before, last year we had 179 ITL3 areas. This year we have 183. And I have two computer scientists back in Manchester trying to look at the relationship between the previous ITL3 areas and the new ITL3 areas by using local authorities in the middle, you know. And you can see, so sometimes I feel like it is a bit of a statistical artifact. They are doing it, the reasoning that we receive from ONS is that they are doing it in order to closer and closer, get closer ITL3s to local authorities, so then we won't have that problem that you are saying. We will use a unit that somehow it relates to the legislative area. But then to me, I think we are going to go further and further from maybe Eurostat or OECD statistical unit. So let's see. It's a long story. Let's see what happens. And I'm conscious about the time, but I can, if you stay, I can give you an answer in the coffee. So
No. Do answer, and then then we'll wrap up.
Yes. So Wales.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a
Just another long story.
Yeah, that's a long story. That's a long story also statistically, because I mean, if you were referring to my scatter plot, what Wales done that, well, one explanation was like last year they introduced several changes on us, so they revised the COVID effect, so working from home and the COVID effect. But at the same time, we know that the annual population survey and the labor force survey, they are not, and this is why also I think we need to be careful when we are looking at productivity analysis. They are not that reliable for areas that are between ITL 3s and local authorities. This is something that I learned when I went to the OECD, that this is a kind of domino effect. Of course, when they somehow they released the data last year, we received from Regional Productivity Forums at TPI many calls at the Productivity Data Lab asking for an explanation for that. So if you go in our blog series, I have a small blog talking about what happened statistically. But behind the scenes, we know that this is happening in many other countries. The labor force survey is becoming a bit more, a bit kind of, I don't want to say not reliable, but I think we have to be very cautious of how we interpret, because since COVID, we have seen that the survey responses for many surveys are lower than they were before. So I will be very cautious when we are looking at this. But of course, now I think Wales has improved in this year. So maybe we need to understand a bit better that. But I'm happy to continue with the conversation, as we are doing quite a lot of analysis at the lab.
Well, thank you all for those questions. I think we had 2 rounds of 3, but they were more like 2 rounds of 5, which I think just shows the interest in the lecture. Before thanking Raquel very much, let me say a couple of things. First of all, you're all very, very cordially invited to reception next door in a minute. So please join us for some drinks, some nibbles, and obviously to carry on the conversation with our lecturer. Secondly, if you've enjoyed this event, as we very much hope you have, then please help us put on more such events by considering becoming a member of NISA. All the details of individual membership on the website, but suffice it to say, it means things like privileged participation in events, access to some of our work, and indeed access to our researchers and indeed the wider network. So do please consider individual membership. It would mean the world to us, both in terms of your personal support, but also just enabling us to put on more such events. Now, I'm not even going to begin to try and sum up everything we've heard. It's been incredibly rich and wide-ranging. I mean, I do have some takeaways. I thought it was really fascinating to hear about innovative and unstructured data to try and capture emerging trends in that very, very complex world that we live in. I was really fascinated by relatedness, in terms of relatedness, the twin transition, that it's not 2 separate ones, they're very much bound together, or certainly should be, relatedness of places, of sectors. And then, of course, the point about policy. We think a lot about policy at NISA, this idea that policy has to be tailored, has to be incredibly targeted and specific, that, one size fits all really, really does not work. That is my 3 takeaways. But before I join you all in thanking Raquel, what we do with our lectures, for the Dean's lectures, that we give them a little present. And so, Raquel, we would like to formally award you this medal
in memory of your fantastic lecture, and really want to say a huge word of thanks. So thank you very much. And this is for you. Right. Thank you again.